There is a well-known saying that goes, always give the hardest job to the laziest person because they will find the easiest way to do it. What is the best real-life example to this you have seen? I once was a temp at a tiny office on a construction site in around 2003. I was only there for one day while the regular person was on some training. They sat me down and told me that I just needed to copy all these numbers from one program to another. So, I selected them, hit Ctrl-C and Ctrl-V. They stared at me. Turns out about 60% of this woman's time had been spent manually typing numbers from one place to another. Had a manager that would manually delete every email from his work inbox. I'll never forget the look he gave me when I clicked the Select All button that was clearly visible the entire time. There was an overworked lady who worked at my company who could hit Shift to copy multiple lines of Excel at once. She saw me do it once and said, "Lady, wait, how did you do that?" Me, "Do what?" Lady, "Copy multiple lines at once." Me, "You just click the first line, hit Shift, then click the last line. Why? How have you been doing it?" Lady, looks at me in disbelief. "I've been copying it line by line. It takes me hours to do it every week." I took the next few hours to show her a bunch of features in Excel and computers in general. I think I saved her 20 hours per week that day. I work in finance at a large multinational corporation. I feel like a big part of our job is to just stop doing things and wait to see who complains. If someone complains, we keep doing it. If silence, then we call it a controlled drop and put it on our performance review for creating efficiencies. Years ago I was completing a daily report that was saved on the shared drive, that 4 different people needed. I skipped it 1 week and no one said anything. Ditto on the second week. Finally, I put a message on the report that said, "If you need this report, please contact the Blue Witch," and I never touched the report again. We were recently cleaning out the shared drive, and I found that report. 2013 was the last time I input anything. We do the scream test. If something sounds useless, looks useless, and smells useless, we reversibly disconnect, hide, or disable it. If someone really screams, we restore it. Nothing required for safety or compliance, and everything is backed up to offline disk. Servers have been turned off instead of replaced. They'll sit for a while then get melted down. I'm sure the big guys do the same thing with entire racks or even data centers. I worked in a CNC shop. There would be a pile of jobs that needed to be done for the month. Some took days to run while others were generally quick. The record for jobs done in one day was 8. What I did was looked through all the jobs and organized them by setup. Meaning, every job has a setup time. Can take an hour to get all the tooling together, setting up the cutting table, and setting the part square to the table so the machine can gauge where the part is, so when I insert the code into the machine it can run flawlessly and drill, mill, tap whatever within a literally hair measurement. For every single job. Majority of parts use standard tooling. And I have automatic tool changing with 20 pockets. Long story short, I figured out how to line up the jobs so they all have the same setup. Blew the record out of the water with 30 jobs done in one day. Saving the company tens of thousands in work hours. All because I didn't feel like doing all the setups that day. Boss hated Excel to the point where he didn't want us using formulas because you can't trust them to be right, so we needed to do all the calculations by hand or on a calculator. He would give me a spreadsheet once or twice a week that required, let's say, 45 seconds to do, but maybe 7 hours by hand, and he told me to go to Starbucks or something and crank it out. He thought that since I pasted as values and he couldn't see the formulas that I did it by hand, when really I just did it in 45 seconds, sent an email on delay for 7 hours, and studied for the next semester. Dude was the poster boy for failing upwards in your career. First day of internship he told me with a straight face he was a work harder not smarter kinda guy. Best part was he once gave me a 50-page printed Excel pages and asked me if I could type it up because they lost the digital copy. Told me it was probably going to be a week of work. Luckily the pages were printed really well, so I just used 5 different PDF to Word converters. Then because each page had the columns averaged and summed up at the bottom, it was super easy to check to make sure that the PDF to Word converter worked properly. Then I just ran a program to compare the 5 different PDF to Word converters, and they all came out identical, so I did a very quick scan. Then after about an hour I concluded a week of work. I turned it in a day earlier than my boss was expecting and acted exasperated when I turned it in, and he was like, "Man, I'm sorry you had to go through that. Thank you for getting that done so quickly." Dude was aggravating. I worked a summer at a mortgage company as an assistant to the underwriters. My only job was printing documents and then hole punching them to put in folders. They had a super fancy Xerox printer that basically did my entire job for me, but the underwriters at this company didn't know how to click through printer settings to make the machine hole punch as it was being printed. I showed them how to do it, and they resisted it super hard, like they didn't trust it. So I got to keep my job, but what was supposed to take me all day literally took me about 20 to 30 minutes first thing in the morning. So they started assigning me real tasks, and even offered to keep me on to eventually become an underwriter, too. Because I was so sharp, I knew how to use the very expensive printer they already had. I was just about to start grad school, so I had to politely decline. But I'm pretty sure they didn't hire someone to replace me when I left. I have a co-worker who did some temp work after college. One of her jobs was at some sort of small bank or financial institution, and her whole job was to keep this huge day planner of everyone's meetings and run around reminding people when their meetings were. She tried showing them that they could just use Google Calendars, but they just wouldn't do that for some reason. This happened in 2019. Maybe not the most impressive story here, but I thought it was a great sidestep of effort nonetheless. Coworker of mine had to get rid of a smaller junk fiberglass boat with no trailer. Our other coworkers are all telling him how much time and money he's going to need to spend to get rid of it, and he's just saying, "Oh, is that so?" He took off one day, and sat down on his lawn with a cooler of beer. That day was garbage day. Inevitably, the trash guys roll up. He hands each of them a cold beer, and says, "Hey boys, got $50 for each of you if you help me out real quick." They fed the entire 12-foot boat into the packer, crushing 2 feet at a time. Growing up we didn't have large stuff pickup, mattresses, old appliances, that sort of thing, so anytime my dad needed something gone like that, he'd sit it by the trash can, and on trash day he'd have me put a 6-pack on the pile while I waited for the school bus, as the trash ran within minutes of the bus. It never failed, whatever was piled up was gone. Worked as a cashier during the holiday season back when I was 16. The supermarket was selling drinks by the boxes, and at that time, we only had barcode scanners that was at the front of the computer. No gun-type scanners existed. I was lazy and didn't want to carry boxes up to the scanner. So I politely asked my customers if I could carve out the barcode from their box to scan and keep. Some agreed, some didn't want to, but eventually I managed to amass all the barcodes needed, labeled them and kept them in a file for easy reference. Apparently, some other cashier got green-eyed at my smart move and complained to the chief cashier, who promptly lectured me on, bullshit alert, how it's dangerous for me to scan such barcodes as I might scan the wrong things. She told me to throw it all away and carry the boxes like I was meant to. I mean, I was young so I could, but the other cashiers were older, and some were elderly and needed the customers themselves to help carry the boxes to the scanner. But whatever, I guess jealousy trumps common sense. I work in a semi-warehouse environment, and we have to track where items are at all times. When we move X item from location A to location B, we had to type out the to and from locations. We do this hundreds of times a shift. I went online to a free barcode maker website and spent about 20 minutes making location barcodes. I save hours a day by scanning barcodes. I did something like that when I worked at a movie rental store. The computers made you sign back in after something like 15 seconds of inactivity. It was so unproductive. After a week or two at the job, I bought some stickers and printed barcodes onto the back of my ID badge. One barcode had my ID, the other had my password. I could scan them both in a second or two. I avoided telling my boss cause I didn't want to get in trouble, but eventually he found out, and when he did, he had me print barcodes for everyone. Just thinking about that computer system makes me mad, and it's been over a decade. Herding yak with a drone takes the cake for me. They run from it, and oddly fear it. Which is surprising considering they have literally zero aerial predators. We only did it a few times because it really makes them uneasy, and doesn't treat them well. But it is very effective and easy, and you can hear them from over half a mile away from inside the house. Edit, I'm really surprised how much this blew up. I've never had so many post replies, but I'll try to get around to answering as many questions as possible. My post history is predominantly yakking off and tower climbing stuff, so I'd suggest going there if you're curious. This is one of the most incredible paragraphs I've ever read, and I'm very much interested in hearing more about yak herding. At my last job, a truck suspension shop, we did inventory every December, and it was someone's job to count all the washers and screws of every size. It was my first inventory, and I casually mentioned that they should just weigh one screw or washer, then weigh them all and divide the weight to get the count. Everyone looked at me like I had given them the key to the universe. Counting washers and screws went from a day or two to just a few hours. I had an absolute B-word of a boss at a restaurant. This lady was trying to be promoted so hard and was just so extra about everything. She wanted me to count every salt packet, lid, straw, and packet of ketchup in any open boxes. Like I couldn't say 3 boxes and 3/4 of a box. I had to say 3 boxes and 872 salt packets. If I gave the numbers too quick, she'd know I lied. So, I'd come up with reasonable sounding numbers and then spend 10 hours playing Pokemon. Eventually I left and went on to bigger and better things. Went by them all years later, an extra B-word was still there in the same job, lol. A few years ago, my mom was tasked with fixing my grandparents' toilet while we were visiting for the holidays. The toilet reservoir was constantly filling and running, and thus flooding the bathroom, because the boy arm wasn't lifting high enough from the water in the reservoir to switch off the water flow. My mom, who is normally a very practical person, had been tackling the issue for hours. She was pretty distraught, thinking we would have to order a new boy arm, maybe even a new sensor, or switch and pull the whole assembly apart to replace everything. She was planning out a trip to Lowe's and pricing things out when I walked in. I took one look at it and bent the metal arm the boy was attached to down, so the arm had a slight upwards curve. The boy still reached the same level in the reservoir but registered on the sensor as higher because of the curve in the arm. Problem solved, Rangers lead the way. I watched it dawn on her what I had done, and she just looked at me like I had a third eye and said, "You little freaking shit. I've been getting my butt kicked by this thing for 4 hours and you fix it in 4 freaking seconds." She was very happy I saved her from more work and spending more money. She calls me her little toilet engineer from time to time. I work on aircraft. It's mildly demeaning. Edit, and now my most upvoted comment is about a crapper I fixed once. Perfect.